We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. It's about flooding from George Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think to move leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the responsibilities and duties of certain authorities and agencies in respect of inland flood prevention, to make provision about the powers of local flood authorities and internal drainage boards, to require the Secretary of State to report to Parliament on the funding of LFAs and IDBs, to provide for the designation of internal drainage board pumping equipment as critical national infrastructure, to require the Secretary of State to prepare and publish a report on the potential merits of establishing a flood compensation fund to support homeowners whose primary residence has become unsaleable as a direct result of flooding, to make provision about the flood reinsurance scheme, to make provision about the responsibilities of developers and water companies in respect of the provision of drainage upgrades with new housing developments, to make water companies statutory consultees for certain planning applications, and to place a duty on fire and rescue services to respond to flood events, and to make provision for national and local digital flood mapping and for connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, when you hear Norfolk and floods, I imagine that you, sir, and like most, think of coastal flooding, salt marsh flooding, storm tides eroding our cliffs, river flooding, the Broads, but not inland flooding from surface water runoff overloading drains and sewers, which is all too often overlooked, which is why I'm introducing this bill today. Mr. Speaker, you are probably, like many, wondering, why is mid-Norfolk flooding? It's Breckland, it's dry, it's sandy, it's inland. The clue is in the name. It should not be flooding. But over the last decade or so, we've seen a spate of inland surface flooding in 23 of my 130 villages, increasing every year. Why? Yes, climate change. In 22-3, we had the wettest October, November, December, January, February and March on record. But also lack of maintenance of council highway culverts, a lack of maintenance of farm ditches, inadequate funding of internal drainage boards, who, by the way, have been doing a really good job since about 1560 when they were created, and local flood authorities, the relinquishing of riparian rights. I'm sorry to say, I think the Environment Agency rather more focused on rivers as habitats than channels to get water off the land. But this is happening in many areas. Why mid-Norfolk? The big factor in mid-Norfolk is new housing. Along the A11 corridor in the last 10-15 years, we've seen 5,000 houses at Thetford, 5,000 houses at Attleborough, 3,000 at Wymondham, 1,000 at Silfield, a 5,000 house new town planned at Snetterton, and in commuter villages like Yaxham, Mattershall and Ellingham, big national developers and their agents like Gladman Homes abusing the 5-year land supply to land bank and then dump massive commuter housing estates on the outskirts of towns and villages without proper infrastructure investment, against the wishes of the local council, local plan and communities who are too often powerless. I want to make clear that I am not against house building, nor all developers. We have excellent local developers in Norfolk like Able Homes who build excellent homes and estates across many of my towns and villages. They aren't the problem. The problem is the rush to dump massive commuter estates on the outskirts of towns and villages and the scale of new housing without adequate infrastructure investment. In 2020, my eyes were fully open to the scale of this when I spent that Christmas week helping residents in my villages clear out sewage water from their houses, get on the telephone lines and try and get Anglia Water to get tankers to pump out the villages. That continued, and in 2023, Mill Lane, Attleborough was hit by a significant flooding event affecting 100 homes. Spare a thought, please, for Lynn and Hans Short, who live next to the culvert, which was, by the way, wrongly installed by Anglia Water before they handed over the riparian responsibilities. Lynn and Hans have been flooded 4 out of the last 5 years. And that's why I've set up the Mid-Norfolk Flood Partnership, worked with the County Council to set up the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance, ably led by Henry Cater and Fiona Johnston, convened our first Norfolk Flood Summit last year, and established and supported local flood action groups. My first instinct was not to come to Parliament or Government for help, but to lead locally. But what has become very clear, not least through the case of Mill Lane, Attleborough, a case study where a culvert was built under the river, inappropriately blocked with a grill that was never properly checked and enforced. It's at the wrong angle, it piles up waste, flooding the houses next to it. We ended up having to put together a multi-agency task force. We removed 30 tonnes of debris from the whole river. There was illegal housing development lower down the watercourse, inappropriate development, and a lack of catchment work all the way through. It was a huge multi-agency project. But this is happening all over the country. Norfolk is only 6 out of the top 10 inland flood counties. And that's why I think, Mr. Speaker, there are 4 new flooding APPGs in this new Parliament. MPs across the House recognise it. And with new house building targets, 1.5 million homes in the next 3 years, this is only going to get more serious. I pay tribute to the new Flood Minister, who I see is on her seat, Peter Bonfield, for his flood review, and I welcome the CSR funding announcement of £2.6 billion for flood and coastal erosion management to protect 65,000 homes. The insurance sector tell us 18 million homes are at risk, 1 in 4 over the next 10-15 years. And this flooding is costing £66 billion a year to the economy. We won't solve this problem unless we really deal with the fundamental, structural, systemic problems causing the misery and chaos around the country. Inland flooding often overlooked as funding goes to the higher profile coastal rivers, towns and cities. Serious lack of clear responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, there are over 30 agencies in Norfolk alone who have responsibility for flooding. The disempowering of local bodies such as the internal drainage boards, local flood authorities with no power or funding, continue building on floodplains without adequate infrastructure, no enforceable requirement to upgrade pre-existing drainage, no funding for those drainage upgrades because most Section 106 money goes on important local services, residents in district council areas with IDB flooding seeing their service funding cuts, tons of data but no proper mapping of where and when these floods are likely to happen. We have the technology and the data to do it. We don't use it. The vital flood re-scheme, limited in time and scope and set to expire, and an insurance, mortgage and saleability time bomb in our housing market. And nothing, sadly, in the recent planning bill, despite multiple amendments, including from the other House. So this bill that I'm introducing today has been designed with and around the advice of frontline bodies to tackle the practical reality of flood prevention in 4 key areas: responsibilities, funding, planning, and national and local data and flood mapping. I've developed it in a spirit of non-partisan practical politics to help and embolden the Minister to take this opportunity to make the key reforms essential to avoid a growing crisis worsening to calamitous levels. I want to thank the many agencies and organisations in the water sector who've helped, in particular local residents, Liz Witcher in Watton, Hans and Lynn in Attleborough and many others too numerous to mention. My councillors, agencies like the Norfolk Flood Alliance and Aviva, a great local Norfolk insurance business on the front line of this crisis. But most of all, this is a bill shaped by and for those poor people up and down this country who, like Hans and Lynn Short at Mill Lane, Attleborough, live in fear of going through the hell of their homes being flooded, through no fault of their own, but because the system has failed them. The planning, drainage, sewerage, insurance and flood prevention system has evolved without design. No single body or person is responsible. That's the problem. It's not fit for purpose today, let alone for the 1.5 million new homes set to be built in the next 3 years. We were all sent here to make the system work for the people who pay their taxes, pay our wages and expect us to deliver. We owe it to them, to the next generation and to repairing public trust in our politics and this Parliament to fix it. And this bill is designed to help the Minister do just that. And I commend it, Mr. Speaker, to the House.
That the honourable members have leave to bring in the bill. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Myself, sir, and Mr. Nick Timothy, Mr. Jerome Mayhew, Mr. James Wilde, Mr. Lee Pincher, Ms. Helen Morgan, Mr. Ros Savage, Mr. Steph Acrone, Mr. Adrian Ramsey, Mr. Blake Stevenson, Mr. Ben Spencer, and myself, sir.
Yes. George Freeman.
Flooding bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 10th of July, sir.
Friday, the 10th of July. I thought you'd had your Wellingtons on, folks. Take care, Joe.